Okay, great. Hey, folks, thanks for joining us tonight at Kailua High School for this conversation with Timothy Connelly, a candidate for House District 50 in the State House of Representatives. We did invite Mike Lee, his opponent, on the Democratic ticket, but Mike was invited but declined to participate tonight. But we do got Tim, and so I'm glad he's here. We'll get right into this. So, Tim, you served as a brigadier general. You said you were part of the Army's Legislative Affairs Office. Why don't you talk a bit about that? It's pretty interesting.
Well, so to lay things out kind of chronologically, Brigadier General is the last rank I held, and I was in leadership roles in that position when I was in congressional affairs. Where I had an experience as helping to lead and coach a team of legislative liaisons. They were all hand-selected fellows who were the only. They came out of uniform, put a suit and tie on. They were the only folks that were actually permitted, along with me, to engage directly with members of Congress and their staff on Capitol Hill on matters concerning the Army and the Army Reserve. And while we didn't lobby, the military doesn't lobby Congress for anything, but what we can do is inform and educate, and that's what we did. We did the best we can because the military feels accountable to, and this is something that's very important to me, the military, which is led by members of the executive branch, correct, receive appropriated funds from Congress, which are taxpayer dollars, and then expend those taxpayer dollars in order to build readiness to ensure our militaries are always prepared to fight and win our nation's wars. And so we would go out of our way to ensure that the appropriators and the authorizers, the folks that appropriated the funds and passed the authorities that allowed us to do our jobs, were convinced that we were doing the best we can with the dollars, with the U.S. taxpayer dollars that we were afforded. I think that that's a model that should and must be followed at the state level from the perspective of transparency to ensure that taxpayer dollars that are collected by the state of Hawaii are then employed by the state of Hawaii and subordinate governments in a way that's fully transparent so that Hawaii residents have confidence that their taxpayer dollars, and they pay a lot of them, are used in the most effective and efficient manner, maximizing return on investment for all the critical things that government should be providing, which is for our safety and security, for our public education, for our clean environment, and for other public services that we receive from the government through our taxpayer dollars. I'm not convinced that our government operates in a fully transparent mode. I don't know that our budget is fully available for public discourse and analysis, if you will, and I don't know that our administration I don't know that our legislature is fully empowered as it should be to hold the executive branch accountable to how it decides to appropriate funds and authorize the government to do the things that it does.
Why don't we break each of those down a little bit? In what ways do you think government could be, and I'm talking state government in particular, could be more transparent in regards to the budget and how it spends its money?
Well, so the government spends money on all kinds of things, on social welfare services, on law enforcement. At the state level, it's the National Guard and the Sheriff's Office. At the local level, it's agencies like the Honolulu Police Department and Fire and Ambulance and the like. At the state level, it's also public education. Our education system is run at the state level. I have a lot of concerns about what the quality of our education here is, and that's certainly not to disparage at all the hardworking members of the education community that teach our kids. But I hear stories like, almost every public teacher that I've met here in Hawaii says to me that they reinvest 5 to 10% of their own paycheck into their classrooms. To me, that's unacceptable. In a state that collects as many taxes as the state of Hawaii does, our education system should be world class. It shouldn't be ranked 40th in the nation as it is now, at least on some of the rankings that I've seen. We can do better with the taxpayer dollars that we spend, but when people ask me, where do you think we should cut? Where do you think we should look? To be able to answer those questions, you need to start by improving transparency. And we improve transparency by passing laws that allow the legislature to hold the administration accountable on how they're appropriating those dollars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, talk a little bit more about that. What should the ledge be doing to hold the executive branch accountable?
Well, I asked the question once, and I've been asked the question, what would you do in office? And the first thing I would do is follow the federal model. I mean, you see it on the news all the time, right? There's members of the House of Representatives at the federal level and the Senate at the federal level. They hold hearings and they bring members of the administration into Congress and ask them questions about things that have happened or expenditures that seem unwarranted, or it's part of the model of three co-equal branches of government. I'm told that in Hawaii that doesn't exist here. I'm told in Hawaii that it's very challenging for the legislature, which is a part-time body, to essentially bring to the table or bring to a hearing members of the executive branch to have them account for the decisions that they make. And that's a significant concern of mine, because that means that we might not have an actual model based on three co-equal branches of government, and with that we might not have all the transparency and accountability that our state government needs.
So, as someone who covers the budget process often, they definitely do have these budget hearings, and they try to bring in executive branch agencies. Often, when legislators are in those hearings, the problem kind of goes back to getting the nitty-gritty details
right
on the budget,
yeah.
Which sort of goes back to what you're talking about regarding budget transparency. So what could, if you become a lawmaker this session, how could you make those financial details and those budget processes more open to the public? And to legislators.
And I think I responded to this both in my Ballotpedia survey responses as well as my Civil Beat responses. You have to make legislation and the budgetary process and the budgets that are passed available before they're passed for public discourse through the internet is probably the most efficient way to do it, but in a way that when they're posted, don't just deluge people with, make the requirement to have an executive summary up front that breaks things down into very simple, understandable, high-level categories so people can see social services, fire and police, and then let people delve into the details more deeply if they so choose, and then have rounds of opportunities for public discourse, whether it be at the Capitol or online or in Teams forums, so people can understand better why tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars are being expended in certain areas that don't make sense to people, and they should have the opportunity to be able to ask those questions, because it's not the government's money, it's the people's money.
I'm just curious, what have your interactions been like with politicians and elected officials in Hawaii?
Well, generally, most politicians that I meet face to face and have conversations with are professional and cordial. I don't necessarily think that I don't know that anyone's trying to do anything deceitful deliberately, but there does seem to be, particularly for example, I just recently sat on a Teams call with an elections commission, and there's some very interesting things that occurred. The link to the meeting changed the night before the meeting. Which confused some people, and then I sat and listened. I didn't say anything myself, but there were a lot of people very upset about how our election process seemingly just swung all of a sudden to this COVID's over, so we swung away from in-person voting, and now we're pretty much on an almost 100% mail-in ballot. There's just a handful of in-person voting locations on election day. I'm not sure why we do that. It changes the landscape and the complexion of how we and the tradition of how we do elections in this country. And there were a lot of people very upset in that particular forum, and I don't feel like really any of their concerns were addressed at any meaningful level.
Mm-hmm. You've also written in your candidate Q&A, and I wanted to reference it. You talked about wanting to reduce business regulations. What regulations do you think should be reduced?
Well, again, that's going to require some more research, but the anecdotal feedback that I've gotten from restaurants is that the administrative burden and the licensing burden and the permitting burden of trying to operate a business in this state is probably best described as daunting when compared to other states across our nation. And when you get that kind of feedback, you realize that we live in a state that is not pro-business. And if you're not pro-business, then businesses don't feel comfortable. Business owners invest with an entrepreneurial spirit in the hopes of creating something from nothing, except investing with their own dollars and their own hard work and their own sweat equity to build something that they can be proud of, and and have it be a business that serves the community with a meaningful, value-added product or service. And if you make it very hard for businesses to do that, and on top of that, tax them heavily, because no economy has ever been taxed into prosperity. That's been proven throughout history. Then businesses are not going to feel incentivized to take the risk to invest in their businesses long term. If you reduce regulations and you reduce tax burdens on business and you stabilize and make more predictable the business environment for businesses, businesses are going to flourish. They're going to be able to charge lower prices. They're going to be able to bring more customers through their doors. Their businesses are going to grow stronger. They're going to make more profit that they're going to reinvest into their business, which is going to allow their business to grow, which is going to allow them to hire more people and put more people on their payroll, which is more people paying payroll taxes. And it actually has a stimulating effect on the economy and actually drives up total tax revenues, even though you're cutting taxes in the process of trying to incentivize businesses to be successful. I'm convinced here in Hawaii, we don't do that. We don't make it easy for businesses to operate, and we tax them heavily in a highly competitive marketplace where profit margins are already quite thin.
Besides taxes, what are things that Hawaii does that other states don't do that make it harder for businesses to operate here?
Besides taxes? Well, I think, and I do owe you some more research on that. But the anecdotal feedback that I've gotten is that to be there's a tax on being a sole proprietor. There's the permitting processes are exceptionally long and administratively and legally burdensome. And so a lot of small businesses, they simply can't afford or don't have on staff the legal and administrative expertise to be able to do all the things that the state needs for them to. Certainly there needs to be state licensing processes in place and permitting processes in place to do certain things. But they should be made as easily and streamlined as possible so that businesses can flourish, so the economy can be stimulated, and that we can promote economic growth and job creation, and not the other way around.
Yeah. What areas for economic growth do you see in this district, specifically in Kailua and Kaneohe, and how would you help grow those areas?
Well, I think there's a lot of Kailua is a beautiful town. That's why I've chosen to live here for pretty much the entire time that I've lived in Hawaii. We have beautiful trails. We have one of the most beautiful beaches in the world here at Kailua Beach. There's significant concern with the water quality issue going into Kailua Beach. And if we don't address that, it's going to have an impact on the tourism industry that wants to come here. Tourists that come here, most of them come here on a day trip from town because there's not a lot of hotels in the area. Kailua is not that kind of place, and I think I'm okay with that. But for the folks that come here from town, a lot of the businesses rely and thrive on them being able to enjoy our beautiful environment. So I do think that there's a strong tie between a strong economy in Kailua and Kaneohe to having a well taken care of environment, and frankly a beautiful private communities, meaning where Hawaii residents live, so that when they drive through there, Kailua and Kaneohe kind of have this wow factor for the people that are passing through here as tourists and as visitors, because then it inspires them to want to come back and continue to bring that business into Kailua. So we can do more. There's too many empty storefronts in Kailua that could be filled with retail or restaurants, and other stores that are popular here in Kailua. But yeah, and the athletics industry, more for the tourism industry. And I think, like I said, I think that's tied to improving our environment.
Yeah, you just mentioned athletics. I understand that you yourself are a professional athlete.
I'm not a professional athlete. I am an avid triathlete. I've completed 9 full Ironman triathlons myself, and I've qualified for the Ironman World Championship, and I'm actually racing the Ironman World Championship over in Kona in 5 weeks from now. So I'm in the middle of my train up for that, while campaigning for an election. So I'm looking forward to that. But I mention that because this community is where I train. I run these roads. I run up in the trails. I bike all of these roads. The quality of our roads is hit or miss. Although the road and the infrastructure issues are more of a city level issue, I think the state can help. But I have very big concerns about the state-run infrastructure, whether it's the quality of our water and our water purification. I swim in the oceans. I bike on these roads. I run on these roads and these trails, and the quality of all of them is very, very important to me. So when I see infrastructure challenges like the one taking place out in front of Kelpoi Market on the way into Lanakai, and that construction project just seems to be never ending. When that's gone on for so long, that would be a perfect example of something that the legislature, either at the city or at the state level, depending on who has oversight of that contract to perform that work, that deserves an audit of some sort to say, what are we doing here? It looks like you've done work, tore it up, did it again, tore it up, did it again. At least that's what it looks like to the bystander who is, and those businesses who are constantly inconvenienced. There's no doubt it's had impact to their business while that construction process goes on. There should be answers and people held accountable for why things like that take place.
You mentioned, the poor water quality that you see in some of the runoff, heading into the Kailua Beach area. What could you, as a state legislator, do to address some of those environmental concerns?
Well, so the water quality issue, I understand, is relatively complex. It is related to the runoff. Because the raw sewage that's in Kailua, it has to go somewhere, right? Or it needs to be treated, and so apparently it's not being treated properly. And so I would, I'm sure assessments have already been done Those assessments should be made public. If they haven't been done or have not been done sufficiently, then obviously an assessment and a rapid assessment needs to be done. But it's almost gotten to the point where I feel like I swim at Kailua Beach often. I'm the president of the Kailua Master Swim Club. We do weekly ocean swims, often all the way around Flat Island. I've swum around Flat Island myself, probably well over 100 times. And all too frequently, we have to cancel our swim because we're concerned about the bacteria count. Mm. That shouldn't be in a place like Kailua Beach, on an island like Oahu, in a state like Hawaii. It's almost inexcusable. So an assessment needs to be done. A professional engineer needs to come in and say, here's the solution, and then we almost do some sort of emergency appropriation to get it fixed quickly, because water is life, and water quality, particularly in Kailua Beach, is part of how the economy flourishes around here, because the beach is such a draw for people that want to come to Kailua.
Mm-hmm. Let me just give you a scenario. I kind of want to see what your thinking is of how you would work through it. Like, let's say you're in office, a constituent comes up to you with a major problem with their, let's just say, a water or sewer pipe burst outside of their home. You're the first elected official they think of to call. Well, what do you do next? How do you navigate through the bureaucracy to help out that person?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like how I would navigate through stuff when I was, I used to be the deputy commander of the garrison at Fort Dix, which is now Joint Base McGuire Dix Lakehurst. And the folks that I had the greatest time working with were the folks in the Department of Public Works, because there, if you had a pothole or a pipe broke or a roof started to leak, you call up the DPW folks and say, who do we have that can fix this quickly, right? And in the military, we always had a thing called an IDIQ, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract, right? An IDIQ contract, and you could, and if we don't have those here, we should, because then you can call somebody and say, hey, here's a problem. Who's the contractor we have on the IDIQ contract that we can say, Johnny on the spot, go out and get this thing fixed because it's broke and it needs to be fixed now, so that you have these pre-established mechanisms in place that allow for rapid repair and rapid recovery of things that are broken or tend to break. Because, we all know pipes break, roofs leak, buildings, foundations crack and struggle. And a lot of these things are emergencies, and you can't afford to go through this belaborious government contracting process. You have to have contract vehicles in place already, so that when I'm asked as a politician, hey, Connelly, this thing happened, this pipe broke in front of my house or in front of my business, and people can't park in front of my business, I'm losing business, I need someone to fix this. The contract mechanism is already in place for somebody to come out quickly and remediate the situation or mitigate the situation and get things back to normal, so businesses and people in their homes don't struggle.
Yeah. You've talked about proposing legislation to reduce the cost of energy in Hawaii. I'm just curious how exactly, what's your thinking on that? How exactly would you make that happen?
Yeah, I've just heard so many bizarre things about how we, provide energy from the energy company here that seems highly inefficient, if not illogical. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I care about the environment. I am not against green energy solutions, but I am against doing things and trying to make promises for a future energy grid that this state does not have the infrastructure in place for, and for which, the residents of this state, if we try and force it upon them, and we're not ready to provide the robust energy grid that is necessary to have a totally green grid, which I'm not even sure I know what that means, but then we're going to force into place an energy program for the state for which the state and its residents are not prepared. It's going to become highly inefficient. It's going to look a lot like the rail line project unfolded, and it's going to drive up energy costs even more than they've already been driven up in this state. So if that's a goal, we need a better plan. And until you have a better plan, you don't eliminate what you're doing now until you know you have a good plan with significant overlap and redundancy, so that when you turn on, you don't turn on the new thing, you don't turn off the thing you're using now before you turn on the new thing. You make sure there's overlap, right? So if you have if you want to go to a green grid, and you have a grid now that's based on what we do now, which is predominantly fossil fuels burned from the electrical plant or whatnot, before you turn off one and turn on the other, you make sure the new thing works before you turn off the old thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that I see a plan like that in place.
You're alluding to the closure of the coal plant a few years ago,
right,
before all the renewable energy projects, wind, solar, were all up and running.
Sure. Now we're experiencing rolling blackouts and the like, and frankly, it's all predictable because, you're trying to force things along for the sake of saying that you're getting things done in this new green energy environment, without ensuring the well-being of your communities, to ensure that they're not going to have, you're not placing their sources of energy at risk. That's just not good business.
Yeah. What do you think the state should do now to fix that situation?
I think we should reset on what we know worked and stabilize ourselves in that manner, whether it's the coal plant or even look at other options. I know the word nuclear or safe nuclear is probably not popular here, but many other states are employing nuclear solutions that can be employed extremely safely. I mean, our military does it all the time, right? Mm-hmm. We have nuclear submarines that frankly could operate indefinitely out at sea if it weren't for the sailors that are on board and operate them. They need to come up and see the light of day from time to time. Bless their souls. I know some good submariners that do amazing work. But let's stabilize first what we have now before we take on new things and employ new things that aren't fully tested and aren't fully vetted before we turn off what we know works.
Yeah. We saw the least number of candidates this year run for office in a decade. What do you think government could do to encourage more people to run?
I'll tell you, that's a hard question, because I think people have seen how toxic the political environment has become, and I think people are turned off by the level of vitriol and political commentary back and forth, and I can tell you firsthand. I mean, I know a lot of my peers, senior officers, retiring from the military. They just spent the last 20, 30 years in the military in what amounts to for many, the most respected occupation in our country. And now you're asking them to step into an arena and an occupation which for many is considered the least respected in the country. And people ask me why are you doing that? Why would you do that to yourself? when you know they're going to attack you, they're going to come out with the personal attacks and that kind of thing. And I've just never been one to stand down from a fight or a challenge. It's why I do Ironman, because I think doing hard things builds resilience. And at the end of the day, our lawmakers, our politicians, make and pass the laws and appropriate the funds. They make and pass the laws that we're all essentially compelled to live by in a law-abiding country, in a law-abiding nation that's essentially governed by the rule of law. The fact that we are governed by the rule of law is what makes us, among other things, the best nation in the world. And our politicians pass those laws. So you could do one or more of the following things. If you don't like the way things are going, you can whine about it. But that's probably not, and you can speak at public forums about it, make your voice heard. That's one thing you can do. You can vote. That's another thing you can do. Or you can put your name on the ballot and your name and face on the line in a campaign and run for office. But to get to your question, why aren't more people doing it? It's because I don't think that they think, for lack of a better phrase, the juice is worth the squeeze, and they don't want to put themselves and their families through kind of the public meat grinder that they see other political candidates go through.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to find a better way. We need to find a more civil way to have public debate about important ideas and discourse in a way that encourages more people to want to be able to step up to the plate and run.
Yeah. Talk a bit more about, despite the political environment, what encouraged you to run for office?
Sorry. My daughter. Thank you, Lon. Go ahead. You're going to listen to me talk, right? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Despite, all the downsides of the current political environment, you touched on it a little bit, but talk a little bit more about, what inspired you to run for office.
What inspired me to run for office was I just thought a lot of living here long enough. Yes, baby. You want to go back and draw? Okay, we're gonna go. See, okay. You want your bottle? Okay, that's your bottle. I was just inspired to run because I saw a lot of things here. I have my four big concerns. I call them the 4 E's: energy, environment, education, and economy. I also now that I've said my 4 E's, I will also say that I think government should be not involved. Sorry about that.
No worries.
You get it. Thanks. Little orange juice. Okay. Can we pause for a minute?
Sure, yeah.
Thanks.
I remember when I was a kid, my favorite thing was like this white grape thing.
Yeah.
Oh, the Welch's?
Yeah, I love the Welch's.
Is that Flint? Okay. All right, sorry. All right, let's go back to your last question there.
You're going over your 4 E's.
Yeah, so, and then I mentioned law enforcement and safety. And the reason I mention that is because I do believe that we should have the lowest level possible of government involved in our lives. But there are some key areas that are critically important to government, and one of them is law enforcement and public safety. And so we've had an uptick in gun violence of late. I think it's directly tied to this whole bizarre defund the police movement. HPD is undermanned and understaffed. That's a city issue. But I think at the state level, we could do more to help strengthen law enforcement, strengthen ourselves in the realm of emergency response, strengthen ourselves in the realm of strengthening our National Guard, so that when disaster strikes or when violence strikes, that we have more rapid response, and that frankly we just have better law enforcement and police presence in the areas that need it, because criminals know that in an environment where crimes are not enforced, laws are not heavily enforced, they're going to feel more emboldened to be able to do things and think that they can get away with it. And frankly, I think that's how the climate is shifting in Hawaii, and we're facing greater and greater crime concerns as a result of those policies, and those policies need to be reversed.
This is a question from our audience. The question is, could you explain how your views on the LGBTQ community adhere to or vary from the national position of the Republican Party?
Well, I consider myself a fiscal conservative and a social moderate. So from a and I am open-minded from the LGBTQ community. I grew up with a gay brother, so being around a homosexual lifestyle is not foreign to me. I love my brothers just as much as I love all my other brothers and sisters. And again, I'm a social moderate, which means I believe very much in live and let live, which means I think everyone who has a personal stance on a position should be able to live their private lives the way they choose. So insofar as they don't seek to excessively impose their lives or their lifestyle on those who are not aligned with their lifestyle. And that goes in both directions. I think that's a fair way to live. And I think when we cross boundaries that impose on the beliefs and the lifestyles of others in either direction, that those are lines that we shouldn't cross out of respect and dignity to each other.
Well, I want to ask you about the legislature next, the body you'd be serving in if you win this election. One of the things you mentioned was, you want the legislature to adhere to the state's sunshine law, having all of the, their meetings regulated, in the way other boards and commissions are. Do you think that they should meet year-round? The legislature right now, typically it goes from January to May. Other states like California, possibly Texas, I think, meet much more frequently, or they have a more open session. What are your views on that?
I think it goes to having three co-equal branches of government. I just don't know how the legislature, working only part of the year and being engaged on a part-time basis in being able to pass and vet and debate. Our country is founded on debate. Legislation that is ultimately going to be passed by and then executed by the executive branch, all of whom is full-time. I don't know that we achieve true three co-equal branches of government to include the oversight that's needed and the debate that's required to ensure that our laws are fully vetted and properly passed in the best interests of the residents of the state of Hawaii.
Have you spoken with the former Republican rep for this district, Rep. Cynthia Thielen?
I'm not.
How would you collaborate with other representatives? Sorry, I screwed up my own question. Let me rewind that. Republicans are a minority in the state house as well as the state senate. A lot of what you need to do to, effectuate policy you want to see would mean reaching across the aisle, working with the Democrats. How do you see yourself managing those interactions and, working with the Dems in the House?
Yeah, I think it starts with doing good policy analysis, good analysis of the existing situation of whatever legislation you're planning on taking on, so that you can come to the table with an informed position as to how things could be done better. And then having done your assessment and looking at how funds are appropriated to execute a given program or budgetary item that is currently in place or under proposal, and then laying out and reaching across the aisle. Republicans have no choice but to reach across the aisle, right? Because we're the minority here, with ideas that while fundamentally in line with our conservative principles, also just take a common sense approach from the perspective of doing what's best for the residents of the state of Hawaii, trying to control their energy costs, trying to control their, try to improve their education, try and stimulate the economy, try and improve the environment, try and strengthen our law enforcement and our public safety, along those lines. In a logical, common sense way. It's not really about being a D or being an R. It's more about doing what's right for the community, to control spending, control our cost of living, improve our quality of life, and stop this constant exfiltration of Hawaii families moving to the mainland because they can't afford to live here anymore. But it takes leadership to reach across the aisle. You can't not be proactive. You have to be proactive and take initiative to learn about the issues and then reach across the aisle with viable proposals. You agree? That frankly would make it almost hard, if not impossible, for my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to agree with, unless they simply just didn't want to agree for the sake of not agreeing, which happens, frankly.
The majority Democrats in the House, they're at an individual level, their issue with advocating for their own positions is that, a lot of times they have to comply with leadership, comply with their committee chairs. Mm-hmm. You folks sort of face similar issues, but more so because you're also outside of that leadership structure. How do you advocate for your positions when you're in that sort of situation?
Again, it just takes leadership. Debate and public discourse is hard work. It's not easy. There's not a magic pill, but that's how our democratic process works. Our democracy works. It's almost by design hard, because our system is designed first and foremost to protect the basic rights of our citizens. And so when things are proposed and certain people come to the table with concerns about doing X, Y, Z, and how that might impose on the individual liberties or freedoms of the citizens of the state or the citizens of the nation, those things are challenged. And we live in a system where when those things are challenged, there's goodness in that. It's hard to get certain things passed because there could potentially be second and third order effects and consequences when we do things and pass things that on its face up front look like they're a positive. We saw that with a lot of laws that were passed post 9/11, and some of the challenges we're facing since that occurred. But you have to be smart, you have to be creative, and you have to be willing to collaborate and work with others to advance common sense and to advance good ideas that, regardless of party affiliation, are the right thing to do for the residents of the state of Hawaii.
Just another scenario for you, say someone in the Democratic Party is advancing something that you really agree with, you really like, but supporting that would go against your fellow Republicans. Would you still advocate for that?
Well, of course, that would be a case-by-case basis. It's hard to respond to that without knowing specifically what the situation is. Yeah. But I am typically, I am typically one to lean towards advocating for things that make sense, that work. And if I really felt strongly about a position on an issue that I was in favor of that was proposed by my opponent or by the opposing party, I should say, and my side of the aisle wasn't on board with that, again, I would step forward from the position of leadership and debate to try to find a place where everyone felt good about the proposal that was being put forth. And of course, you present a hypothetical situation, so it's hard to speak to that without context or specifics.
Last question. District 50 covers a portion of Kaneohe Bay.
Yep.
How does that population differ from Kailua, and what specific issues would you seek to address there?
I don't know. I think that community is a lot like Kailua. They enjoy the beautiful side of town that they live in. Okay, come on. Kaneohe Bay is beautiful. They're more closely impacted by the Marine Corps base. So the Marine Corps base, I think, for the Kaneohe residents brings a slightly different dynamic than the majority of Kailua deals with. And given my military background and my ability to reach out to military leaders in an informed way, in an experienced manner, that would help to rebuild the ties with the Marine Corps base and maybe have them more closely integrated with the community, is something that I think would make a big difference for that portion of Kaneohe that is in District 50, because that portion of Kaneohe in District 50 is also the portion of Kaneohe that's the closest to the Marine Corps base.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great, Tim. Thanks for joining us today.
Good job.
Yeah, why don't you give the candidate a round of applause?
Thank you.
You think your daddy did good? We think you did good.